Hey everybody, I'm Aaron Simmons. This is Philosophy for Where We Find Ourselves, January 11th, 2023. So today I want to think a little bit about the idea of influence. Recently I was told I needed a new website in order to have a greater influence on the marketplace in light of the fact that I'm trying to get my new book, Camping with Kierkegaard, accepted at a publisher. Well, I'm happy to do this, and in fact, I have now established a new website, jaronsimmons.com. Check it out. I'd greatly appreciate it. But while I was putting this together, of course, it made me really frustrated. The idea was, well, look, if the book is good, then that should be why the influence follows, not get a bunch of influence so you can then publish a book, whether or not it's good. The idea that somehow sales would be the fundamental value set by which we make sense of quality is already a very strange way of approaching the idea of excellence. But it's actually, I think, reflective of something that is of broader significance right now in our contemporary world. Think about the way influence and influencers function as a social idea. We tend to think that influence is basically those people who tell us what we should think, how we should live, what we should do. They are the ones to whom we turn in order to make sense of who we should be. Well, interestingly, in the history of philosophy, it didn't exactly work that way. Think about the legacy of Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. These three are not necessarily being influenced by the other in order to be shaped and take their ideas from them, but instead they receive the influence as an encouragement to live on purpose in a direction that you think is worthwhile. So Socrates lives a particular way. Of course, he influences Plato, but Plato then defines his own identity in many ways by being critical of some of what Socrates said. And more so, Aristotle, who fundamentally rejects an awful lot of what Plato had articulated. So we end up not seeing Plato, Aristotle, Socrates as these thinkers who simply pass down ideas one to the next, but thinkers who think out loud and in conversation with each other and recognize that critique is not at odds with being influenced. Maybe today we should think more effectively about who influences us and whether or not we have the ability to be critical of that influence when we think it is misguided. For example, think about the way in which Heidegger influences Emmanuel Levinas. Levinas, in many ways, is shaped by the thinking of Heidegger, and it inaugurates his own thought, his own trajectory. But then Levinas's real brilliance occurs when he diverges from Heidegger, when he thinks at odds with Heidegger in light of Heidegger. Friedrich Nietzsche, in fact, once said that the goal was not to make disciples, but to invite people to go their own way toward greatness. Sadly, we now think of influence in our culture as going the way that some famous person goes, rather than following in the footsteps of those who understood the task of greatness as a lived commitment to humility, truth, excellence, goodness. Well, anyway, the thought is simply that being philosophical in how we make sense of influence and being influenced requires us to be able to engage in critical distance and critical engagement. Find a way today to reflect on who influences you, and then think about what parts of that influence you want to affirm and what parts you might want to push pause on. Hopefully this will let us all move forward in directions that are worthwhile and worthy of our finitude, instead of simply moving in the directions that others decided we should walk. I hope this is helpful. As always, I'll see you next time, unless a piano falls on our heads.